In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing the pros and cons to baiting or supplement feeding.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
Mr. Cody Altizer.
What's up?
If I were to tell you I shot one of the best bucks I've ever shot in my life or career over a pile of corn, would you think any less of me?
Of course not.
Really?
No.
That's a very good answer. Or is it? And that is what we're talking about today.
Right. It's all in how you look at it. In this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of baiting, hunting over bait, as well as supplemental feeding. And It's funny when you ask me the question, it just has a negative connotation. Depending, I mean, I'm on your team. Like, I'm happy for you. You shot the biggest buck of your life over a pile of corn, and I'm happy for you. But even hearing you phrase the question that way, it just rings a little differently, as opposed to if you were to ask me, Cody, I rattled in this buck, or I shot this buck over a food plot. Just saying I shot this deer over corn, it has a different ring to it. There's there's a lot of nuance that goes into hunting deer over bait, which we're going to highlight and discuss in this video.
Yeah, and you know, especially as of late on social media, podcasts, it seems to be the hottest topic.
Right.
And I know I hear a lot of it from my clientele, whether I should bait, not bait, supplement feed. And it does have this negative thing to it, like you're less of a hunter.
Right.
And, that alone is something where we're legal. It's ethical.
Right.
I live in a state that you're allowed to supplement feed and bait. And if you were to take a poll, it would be slightly higher in favor of baiting. Now in Virginia, where you live, where baiting is not, you didn't grow up with that.
Right.
So if you were to take a poll, baiting wouldn't be very high.
Right.
So it's regional, it's where you grow up, it's your roots and all this stuff. I mean, that's a rabbit hole. This is a big rabbit hole that we can all go down, reference baiting and hunting deer. Is it ethical? Is it not? Is it less? I mean, might as well throw a crossbow in there,
Right.
I mean, that seems to be where we're heading with this. It is a hot topic.
Yeah, it's part of deer hunting culture, like you mentioned. If you grow up in an area where it's legal and always been legal, I mean, you don't know anything different, and that's what you know. And if it's an area where it's not legal, then yeah, you look at it differently. But all that to say, it's part of deer hunting culture. But let's talk about the pros and cons of hunting over bait, and let's start positively.
Yes.
I'm a positive person. Talk about the pros.
Well, the pros is, I tell you what, let's start with the easy one. The easy picking fruit, hanging fruit, that is. Getting somebody into hunting. That seems to be a little a thing that people do, like with children.
Yeah.
You put a box blind up or a blind, you put some corn. You want your child, or you're a mentor, the person that you're taking out. You want them to enjoy the aspect of hunting and hopefully, on a successful harvest.
Right.
But obviously, you can tell the negative aspect of that. But just let's keep the pros for right now.
Right.
So, it's attracting deer. You will see white-tailed deer more times than not.
Access and opportunity. Hunting over bait provides both of those, and oftentimes those two things are a limiting factor for new hunters. Younger hunters, I remember when I was 6 years old, I didn't shoot a deer over bait. I shot my first deer when I was 6, but it would have been easier, and I would have had more opportunities, and my dad would have saved a lot of time if we were hunting over bait instead of dragging me into the woods when I didn't want to get up early in the morning to try to get me a deer. So if you're a new hunter, we're trying to recruit new hunters into the sport all the time, hunting over bait provides opportunity, because if you've never shot a deer, you don't want to spend day after day after day trying to get it done. You want to have deer in front of you and enjoy the animal and learn about their behavior. Baiting checks that box. Access, again, where do you go to hunt and to enjoy animals? Putting bait in front of a stand and having deer attracted to that gives you access to enjoy the sport and the animal.
Yeah. And I like the baiting aspect of it is the hunting part of it. And there's many more pros to it, but let's just kind of keep the ball rolling. Supplement feeding, which is not baiting. Baiting is something where you put out and you hunt over, and supplement feeding is something where you're getting deer nutrition, whether it's a high quality deer feed or during the late winter months, the stressful times of year, putting corn back in their diet a little bit. It's high fat. They're building their body back up, so that way they can go into growing season ready to rock and roll instead of putting muscle and all this other stuff on there. That's the theory behind it.
Yeah.
So supplement feeding, there are a lot of pros to supplement feeding, obviously, and as well as baiting.
Yeah, I think when it comes to baiting and supplemental feeding, there are some pros, which we just highlighted, but I think it's easier to find the cons, unfortunately.
Yeah. And yeah, it is.
It is.
It's a lot heavy on the con side here. But no, just, you know, we talked about the pro of baiting in the sense of taking youth out or being a mentor. Like, you know, the key thing is getting a new person out exposed to the art of hunting.
Right.
Okay, flip side of that coin. The big argument of baiting when it comes to, is, are we creating killers instead of hunters? Because today's youth, we were really getting kids out. You know, we just don't want kids to go up in today's society. Their, minds going 100 miles an hour and everything like that. You know, you want them to have that quick fix.
Yeah.
So what we would do, we put them in a blind, put the corn pile out, and they were just they were doing a job.
Right.
But kids today, is that a false narrative? That's not what hunting is about. We didn't, grow them up squirrel hunting and learning the art and science of it and the skill of hunting. And that's something too, it's like you can even go even further in the sense of, are we teaching them how to support hunting instead of just the killing aspect of it? So that is one con when it comes to baiting.
Yeah, you said it really well, and you've always said this, are we teaching new hunters, are we teaching kids how to kill, or are we teaching them how to hunt? And baiting, it makes it easier.
It does.
And in the process, you lose a lot of that trial and error, which makes you a better hunter, a better woodsman. You learn less about the deer's biology and behavior. I mean, I mentioned when I was 6, it would have been easier for me to shoot a deer over bait than the way that I did it, but I wouldn't change the way that I did it for anything, because I spent time in the stand and I learned about nature, and I watched the birds, and my dad taught me about the tree species, and in that process I became a hunter and not just a killer.
Yeah. Speeding up a little bit, another con would be obviously disease factor, and not just necessarily for the white-tailed deer. There's obviously the disease, that's a lot of words there for me, the disease of chronic wasting disease, and for all us deer hunters that seems to be a big thing, a debate issue as well. Yeah. But corn, attracting deer to one specific area where there's saliva, and everything up in urine that they can possibly contact chronic wasting disease. But not just necessarily the deer. There's so much disease factor that could be, especially if you pile it, just put it in one big giant pile instead of spreading it out to where there's no competition, because bait piles is a predator-prey type situation, and you do have deer condensed, and if you are going to bait, spread it out, because stress dictates everything. Obviously, we talk when it comes to natural habitat or baiting, but turkeys, there's a lot of studies that's ongoing, aflatoxins, the toxic, from corn, rotting corn, and again, there's so much other stuff that wildlife that utilizes that corn pile, blue jays, squirrels, etc. So could you be causing a disease situation?
Right, and you mentioned habitat too, and not so much on the baiting side of things, but big picture supplemental feeding, it artificially inflates the carrying capacity, because those animals, they're not relying on native habitat if you remove the supplemental feed from the picture, then they are consuming natural plants, native plants, as they naturally would. When there is an artificial food source, which is what baiting or supplemental feeding is, then it artificially inflates the carrying capacity, because wildlife have an unnatural food source that is meeting their nutritional requirements. And as a result, that takes a toll on the health of the animals, because anytime the population exceeds the carrying capacity, those animals are going to be stressed, and it stresses the habitat in the process as well.
Yeah. The big thing, whether you're going to decide to bait or not bait, or use supplement feed or not use supplement feed, the big thing, it is a management tool in that management toolbox. I know for myself, I do use bait in situations where on properties that I need to harvest quite a few does. And sitting in a tree stand, just wait. I mean, I need to produce results. And that is one way that I use that to control the population early on the properties that we're hunting to bring the population down, because it's just an ongoing thing,
Right.
So it is a tool in the management toolbox. How you choose to use that tool, really, it's up to you.
Yeah, you got to answer the question of, is it important to me or not? And honestly, I grew up thinking that hunting over bait I looked down on it. And as I hunt up here with you in Ohio, where it is legal, and I hunt over bait, and I've never shot a deer over bait up here, but I've been a part of successful hunts where people that we've been with have shot nice deer over bait. And when I think back to that hunt, to me, it doesn't cheapen the experience, because when I first thought of hunting over bait, I was like, well, if I kill it, I'll kill a really nice buck, but I shot it over corn. It's all in your mindset. It's a question you got to answer for yourself. If I go out and shoot the biggest buck of my life tonight over a pile of corn, I'm not going to remember shooting it over corn. I'm going to remember the deer. I'm going to remember the pictures, the blood trail, celebrating it with friends. So it's all in what you value and how you approach hunting over bait and supplemental feeding. As is all things hunting, it's entirely personal. It's a question that you've got to answer for yourself, whether or not it's important to you.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.